Hello and welcome back to the Semiconductor Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Salah Nasri, live from Penang. This is a podcast dedicated to those who are intrigued about the semiconductor industry or those who are just curious of what is happening next. So whether you are looking at cutting edge technologies or leadership strategies or market insights and trends or just genuine problems that are involved in the semiconductor manufacturing ecosystem, this is the podcast for you. But before we head direct into the discussion, I have a small favor. Simply click that subscribe button on YouTube or Spotify to stay up to date with what is happening. So, without further ado, it is with great pleasure to welcome our special guest today. It is none other than Dr. Harry Narayanan, the CEO of Penang Development and Skills Centre. He prefers me just to call him Harry. So, Harry, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to have the discussion with you.
Marvelous. Harry, I mean, look, I'd love to understand exactly the work that you're actually doing with PSDC, but I'd actually prefer to know more so of how you grew up and how you ended up at PSD.
Well, that's a long story given my age.
You still look well.
I was thinking about this, and even at the age of about 8 or 9 years old, I really wanted to become an engineer. I was very passionate of wanting to become an engineer. I think if you look at an Indian family in the old days, typically they will send the kids off to do medicine or become a lawyer. I don't know why Indians speak well. I don't know. But I refused. I wanted to be an engineer, and that's what I did. And I did my degree back in the UK, and then I did quite well. And my, I guess, mentor at the point in time, suggested that I should do my PhD. So I went out to do my PhD. Then at the time, my supervisor said, "Hey, there is a position at the University of Manchester where I did my PhD. Hey, there's a lecturer position. Why don't you apply for it?" I applied and I got the job. So my first real job was to become a lecturer. Academic. PhDs, you typically do that. But after several years, I felt that I wanted something more and more experience from industry. And coincidentally, at the same time, I had to return home to Malaysia. I walked into a company called Motorola Solutions way back in 1991, and I got the job.
Wow.
And I left Motorola in 2018, and I stayed there. Not because loyalty, because I loved the company. I loved their purpose, their vision, and so forth. And I went through the entire R&D for nearly 27 years, all the way from a technical staff, and finally heading the R&D organization, and finally the entire Motorola Solutions. So it gave me a huge amount of experience, good, bad, ugly, but you learn from every one of them. Thereafter, I moved on and I was available, and the local university, University of Science Malaysia, took me on as the board chairman for a couple of years. And during the time, one of the local universities, a private university in Kuala Lumpur, Asia Pacific University, the founder came to know about me and felt that I should assist him in, tweaking some of the corporate cultures in the organization. So I spent about 4.5 years there. But, the reason I left was I also, at my age, I wanted to make sure that I bring in successors to lead the organization. I brought very strong successors. I made certain structural changes to the organization. I think it was time to move on. And I moved on, and that was kind of middle of 2023, and around end of 2023, this opportunity to lead the Penang Skills Development Centre came about, and I was offered the position. I felt that going back to the roots and between industry and academia would be fantastic for me, and that's where I am at this point in time. So
what triggered the move from industry to academia?
After retirement, it wasn't. And if you think about it, my life, 27 years in Motorola, went through almost different functions and so forth. I felt that I have a lot of experience at that I can share with the academia. And as you know, there's a lot of discussions. Every discussion with industry dialogue would be, oh, we don't have enough talent. We don't have enough talent. You know what I mean? So I felt that I could bring some of the industrial experience and all the enrichment that we have to help, assist the university. And, it's different. To be honest with you, once you've worked in industry and getting into an academic, it's different, totally different world. And you can't change that. But what you can do is to nurture, increment, get them to understand and appreciate, what's happening. Let me give you an example. One of my, I don't know if it's a theory or this is true, is, one of the things I used to do when I was in the university, just, the last few years, and I was at a vice chancellor level, president level, and, mine is, strategy and growth and so forth. I would go sit in some of the lectures. See how the lecturers are teaching. And I started finding out that they are teaching that without much of an understanding or much of an appreciation or giving appreciation, if you want to call it, how it applies to the real world. You know what I mean? And I think that is one of the challenges that we have where, I think when industry comes back and said, hey, we need this kind of stuff, it is embedded in the curriculum. Absolutely okay. But it's the way it is conveyed is the challenge. You know what I mean? So that's what I learned, some of the things. So now I'm trying to encourage both industry and academia to work together to see how to close the loop on that. So anyway.
I mean, of course, the industry is dependent on academia and academia is dependent on industry.
Yes.
So
yes.
Scratch my back, scratch yours type of initiative in this in our industry.
Yeah, and I think that years ago, and even there is a bit of when you talk to the industry folks, and they would critique the university. You're not doing that. You're not doing this, and so forth. And I learned this from I think a couple of the ministers in some of the dialogues that we've had with, especially YB Singh, who is the HR minister, and he basically said, look, you can't continue to do this. I think we got to collaborate. It's a common problem, and we got to come up with a common solution. How do we collaborate? Yeah. So I always say that in the old days, industry would knock at the doors of the university, but now I think universities are knocking at the doors of the industry. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So there needs to be a lot more collaboration, a joint effort.
So with Penang Skills and Development Centre, PSDC, so to the world who are little in the audience, it's a global audience that's listening to this podcast. Could you describe its core mission and main initiatives for those that are not aware?
I'll give you a history of it, going back to its vision, and I would call it the purpose. And it's really focused on providing, becoming a center of excellence to provide talent development initiatives to industry. Yeah. So if I were to step back, it was formed about 36 years ago. And why was it formed? How was it formed? Really, at the time, if you look at Salah, going back the early 70s, that's when there's a huge influx of industries that were coming into Penang at the point in time. And if you look at the early 80s and mid 80s, there was a lot more influx. And certain companies started seeing challenges in terms of talent. I mean, we talk about talent challenges. They started seeing it way back in the mid 80s and so forth. And the challenges were the same among the companies. They wanted, but at the time, because it was more labor intensive and more manual centric work, it wasn't at the higher end of engineers.
Right.
They had a shortage of operators and technicians and to run the manufacturing and so forth. So a couple of companies got together at that point in time, and they felt that they needed a common solution for this rather than everyone attacking this problem at the same time with probably the same kind of strategy. So they went to the Penang Development Corporation at the time and felt that they needed a common solution. And that's when, and the discussion started around 1987, and in 1989, Penang Skills Development Centre was formed. It was in a very small shop, a kind of a shop lot type of building. And it was very interesting when I go back and look at the history and talk to the very first CEO of PSDC, and he told me, Harry, they gave me 60,000 ringgit at the time to make it happen. And I asked them, he asked them, what happens if I run out of money? He said, close shop and move on. That's how it started. And, kudos to the predecessors who made that a very successful organization. The focus has always been, to provide upskilling and reskilling of talents to the industry. PSDC is a society-registered society. It is not a private company per se. It is a member-based organization. At this point in time, we have about 263 member companies, both local and MNCs, and we serve them for talent development. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, what PSDC is about.
Marvelous.
And by the way, way back in 94, 95, at that time, the Prime Minister visited the Penang PSDC, that was Tun Mahathir, and felt that this is a good role model or a good organization that they should, replicate in other states. And that's how many of the skills development centers in other states came about. We are kind of unique because whilst we are called Penang Skills Development Centre, it's not under the state. As I said, it's a member-based organization. The management council, 100% is made up of the CEOs and the GMs of companies that are elected in AGMs and so forth. In some states, they are run by the state. In some states, they run the way we run at PSDC.
Wow. So, I mean, how does PSDC specifically identify the skill requirements in a complicated industry like the semiconductor manufacturing world? I mean, how do you integrate those needs into your training programs?
As I mentioned, historically, it's in our DNA. Historically, it was formed by industry for industry. Yeah, so that makes it easier in a way that industry is not foreign to us. In almost all instances, that I think the way, and this is not specifically for PSD, but even for a service company or a solutions company, a product company, there are two ways of looking at what the solution should be. One is that you could do an inside out. In my strategy is that we do have staff that are very focused on very specific technological areas. They continue to look at what the trends are out there, and that's more of inside out. They will come out with proposal. Hey, these are some of the things that's happening. We should curate these kind of programs for industry. That's one way of doing it. The other is that we have regular dialogues with our members. And through those dialogues, we will get to understand what are their requirements, what are their pain points. Sometimes they are very clear in terms of say, hey, we need this kind of programs. So it is kind of a two-way street in curating and developing the type of programs that industry would need. Yeah. We got to be cautious about the inside out because sometimes, as they say, you take the horse to the water, it won't drink. You know what I mean? So we got to make sure that we are hitting the sweet spot of what the real industry. And also in some instances, certain industries are very proactive. They look at a long-term view and they agree, and these are the things they need. And most instances, manufacturing organizations are very tactical. They need just in time. Do you know what I mean? So you got to modulate it and moderate it in terms of how do you provide the solutions to the industry. Yeah.
Right. And from your perspective then, because, evidently, the biggest need that you're fulfilling is the talent shortage. From a scale of 1 to 10, how severe is the talent shortage?
I had the same discussion just a couple of days ago in a panel. on Friday last week. And, I've been with the industry for the last 30 odd years. And every other time we talk about talent shortage and so forth. So I want to be very cautious because, when you go to any, as I said, when you go to any discussions, we can talk about strategy, talk about ease of doing business. At the end of it, talent comes back as the main topic. And I think in our conference, you had that very focused attention, and it was a very lively discussion on talent. I think that talent shortage could be on a scale, you say 1 to 10 is the most severe, I guess. That's what I want to make it. I would say that we're at about 6, 7. I don't think we are at an ember position rather than on a red flag position. At the same time, what tends to happen is that when you analyze it, there are certain areas there are severe shortages, and that could be red flag. There are certain areas that are more of the lighter yellow and green and so forth. So we got to be like in one of the discussions we had with Talent Corp, and they talk about the fact that Malaysia do produce a lot of graduates, but then the job skills are not there. Ooh, wow. Then we have the talents, but it's not matching. We're not so sure. But if you look at it from a sectorial perspective, especially in the E&E and semiconductor, where Penang is very focused on, there are specific areas where there are acute shortages, and there are a few companies that felt that there's no way of growing that, and they've gone to other regions, other countries to develop their products in specific areas. But generally, I think it's in an ember position. But this is a catch up, and we got to be better at it. And how do we stay ahead of the curve? Because if you look at Penang and if you look at Malaysia, the influx of foreign investments continues to happen. I think, Salah, that, there are studies that says that from a semiconductor E&E, the next couple of years, it could reach a USD $1 trillion. And Penang plays, or Malaysia plays, a significant role in the entire semiconductor. So for me, it is a exponential growth, and we need to do all the actions we need to take in order to get the amber to become more and more green in that sense. Yeah. It's a long answer. But...
Yeah, no, it's a very fair response. But I mean, what I'd be also intrigued to know is that how do government agencies or policy frameworks play in supporting PSDC's objectives, because it's a huge benefit to them as well, right?
Yeah.
So
I think for us, just to let you know that we work directly with industries. So we provide in Malaysia, I think you're aware that companies contribute a percent of their salary into this HRDF levy, kind of this kitty. And when we provide the training, we recoup, and that's how the training is paid for. Having said that, if you look at the government agencies and the government, they've been highly receptive, and they are listening very well to the needs of the industry. If you look at Talent Corp, for example, they have initiated what you call the Future Skills Talents Council to look at what are the talent requirements and how do we fund some of these training interventions. They're doing that. More recently, Kazana, and they are a GLC, but they've been asked to help. And a couple of months ago, we had a 1 full day of dialogue with Kazana, and they gleaned in terms of what are the needs and so forth. And they have just, if I'm not mistaken, recently introduced a program called the K-Youth Development Program. Again, funding to help upskill, reskill talents and so forth. MDEC does something similar in terms of providing funding and incentives to help reskill, upskill talents, especially unemployed graduates and so forth. So in my mind, the government is very fair. They are, and semi-governmental organizations putting a lot of focus and putting a lot of funding in terms of developing talents and so forth. Of course, there is, I always call it, if you look at the entire system of talent, there is the input to the education establishment, and there's a processing in the education establishment. If the processing is good, you don't need a lot of post-school finishing touches. But we have three of them working together. But one of the things that we need to do more and more is how do we work with the higher learning institutions to make sure that the talents that are coming out of these institutions, I wouldn't call it industry ready, but good enough to be assimilated into industry. So there are strategies on both three areas, and kudos to the government and the government agencies. More needs to be done, because I always think that sometimes in certain sectors like EME and SME, that Malaysia is punching above its weight, which is good, but we need to keep doing that. Yeah.
But I mean, PSDC is evidently playing a key role in Penang's reputation as a semiconductor hub at the end of the day. Could you share any success stories or examples that highlight, PSDC's impact on the local industry growth?
I think, as I mentioned, historically, companies came together to establish PSDC. That in itself shows that the industries strongly believe in what PSDC does, and so forth. Without, I think, mentioning names of companies, I'll give you some near-term examples. A fairly large MNC came on board about six years ago, perhaps. Semiconductor equipment manufacturer, huge company, and they wanted to make sure that they have the right talents to move into their manufacturing. And what they did was they partnered. They did a long-term partnership, and this is like 3-4 year partnership in terms of PSDC. Focusing on providing at least a month's training on onboarding these young and inexperienced talents and so forth. This model is proven to be very successful. They continue to work with us in order to make sure that all onboarding goes through PSDC. Yeah, that's one example. The other part is that we've been very successful, and I think that we are the very first in Malaysia to do the German dual vocational training. And if you look at, and I can mention the names of the companies too, Bosch is a very strong, B. Braun and Bosch are very strong proponents of this GTVT, and they've been partnering with us over the last few years to continue to run these kind of programs. GTVT is basically 70% working at the company, 30% coming back to PSDC to embellish and maybe add a few more skill sets and a bit more theory into that. So that is a very, very strong partnership. We keep doing this for the last few years. Those are some of the examples. The other part of it is there's been over the last 3-4 years, what we see as a trend at PSDC is that there are companies that are looking at workforce transformation. Yeah. One particular MNC again looked at in terms of, this is 2-3 years ago, in terms of how do we, and this is not at the higher level, but at the mid and the lower level, how do we make sure that the entire workforce are more digital savvy and they are conversant with digitalization and so forth. So we partnered with them, looked at the curriculum, and worked together to provide entire digitalization transformation for some of these companies. There are other companies that are, for example, they wanted to do, again, with technician training. So there are a number of examples that I can go on, and these are some highlights, if you want to call it. So we continue to do that. And by the way, I think you probably heard more recently that with the strategy of the Penang state is to create the IC design ecosystem, Salah, and I think you know that. And PMX announced end of last year, December, about Penang setting up these and getting the funding from both federal and state. And PSDC plays a crucial role in that from a talent development, and in the setting up of the Penang Chip Design Academy is imminent. And we got the funding, and thanks to the state and federal. And this is another proactive step to help grow the IC design ecosystem in Penang.
Yeah, marvelous. One of the interesting things is that I'm sure you're seeing it, and as you're fully aware, Harry, a lot of countries are now looking to Malaysia and how Malaysia's done it, and specifically Penang. So my question to you is that beyond Penang, how do you see PSDC's programs influencing not just Malaysia, but Southeast Asia as a whole, and maybe the countries that are just about to come into the semiconductor business?
Okay. To be fair, we have not been going beyond Malaysia. We go beyond Penang too. I'll come back to the beyond Malaysia. For example, we are continue to work with Johor Skills in terms of how do we use some of the best practices of what Penang has done to help them grow the south side. We are even reaching out to Sarawak Skills. They are very well established, but given our electronics industry experience, I think there's these are areas that we could share with them. So that's and by the way, we have members from all over the country in that sense. We have not been very active going beyond Penang or Penang in Malaysia in that instance. At the same time, it's interesting that there are one or two training organizations from India, for example, are keen to see what we do and to see how we can replicate this model that we have in Penang, because they are also into the semiconductor, as you know. They are trying to grow that particular industry and so forth. One of the Middle East, it was Saudi Arabia, one of the organizations, and I'm not, you know that better than me. I don't know much about the geography, but there's a place called Dammam, is that right?
Dammam, yeah.
And I think there's some strategy going on in Saudi Arabia, and they came and spent a couple of days with us to understand the model that we are using, and they are very happy and pleased. And we signed an MOU a couple of months ago, but we need to have a follow-up in terms of how we can help them to develop an organization of PSDC. And for them, it looks like what they want to do is to set up an organization like us and woo more investors into that region. Whereas we were a little different. Companies came, they set up PSDC, but both can work in that sense. So to be fair, we have not done a lot, but I believe that there is a growing interest from other country agencies to see how they could replicate a PSDC-like model out there. And we are more than happy to work with them in that sense.
Marvelous. Harry, from your perspective, what would you say are the key attributes for someone to be successful in Penang, in the semiconductor industry, that's just come out of university and is gone to PSDC, came out of PSDC and has just entered the real world, as one would say?
I think you're asking me, but I have my own way of, because some of the I guess that I have my behavior, my principles and values. And if you ask the same question, people will say it's slightly different. At the end of it, I over the years, I've learned that to hire talents, and I was in Motorola, I've gone through hundreds of interviews, interviewing people. It's very important that, of course, you got to have the basic competency. Yeah. You got it. If you want to enter into a company and you want to serve it, you got to have the basic competencies and knowledge and skill sets. That's one part of it, and I'll spend a bit of time explaining that too. But more importantly, in my mind, is the attitude. Yeah, for me, I don't know, Salah. I think this one I do that in my career talk. I kind of put smart, SMART, clever or intelligent, and then I'll put attitude. And if you were to assign 1 to A, 2 to B, 3 to C, and Z is what, 26? If you put that and calculate what attitude gives you, it's 100%.
Wow. Look at that.
Go try it out.
I'm going to try it out.
So what I mean, and that is just coincidence. And I always use that as the example when I talk to graduates, that whatever that is, you will have the competency and you have the you got to have the right attitude. What I mean by the right attitude is, it's always, if you don't know, you say don't know, and you go willing to go learn about it, And attitude will make you more resourceful. Attitude will make sure that you're proactive. Attitude, positive attitude, that is what it is. So I always look for that among talents. Even now when I hire for PSDC, I look for that. I'm not too worried about whether you're a 3.8 or, yes, it is important. And I'm not saying, you bring a bunch of attributes that probably the industry needs. But more importantly is the attitude. It's so vital. I mean, there are a lot of other areas that, in fact, last Friday I was in a panel discussion and one of the panelists said that, look, we got to look for critical thinking. And, if you look at the Economic Forum, Future Skills and so forth, a lot of them are actually biased towards soft. It's not, yes, you need data analytics, you need AI, you need this and that and this and that. But a lot of them are based on more of the soft skills, human skills, if you want to call it. So anyway, that's a quick answer to you.
Thank you. So, Harry, from your side, looking forward, what are the major goals that you have for PSDC in the, say, next 3 to 5 years?
I've learned that sometimes my horizon is shorter. And I look at about, you're right, you're on the range of, 2 to 3 years. And our purpose is to continue to add value to the members and industry around us. And not just the member companies, but industry. And, there are 2 or 3 higher level purpose that we have. We want to make sure that we are fully aligned to the Malaysian government focus from the NSS perspective and in NMP 2030 to continue to grow, to continue to make sure that we're deep rooting the manufacturing, if you want to call it, and expanding, they call it the left shift to the front end activities and so forth. We got to be there to help grow those areas to support the government. Of course, from a Penang state perspective, it's very well aligned to the Malaysian government's NSS and NMP 2030 strategy. Yeah. So overall purpose is that we are there to add value. We are there to provide the talent interventions, we want to call it, to help, again, deep root manufacturing and broaden our capabilities, especially in the front end activities and so forth. In order to do that, in fact, we had a strategy meeting with industry last September just to validate the direction of PSDC for the next 2 to 3 years. We feel very strong that we need to continue to add more, training programs and upskilling capabilities, especially in the semiconductor. And more importantly is the chip design and also the advanced packaging. In fact, so much so that yesterday I was talking to an investor from the Silicon Valley, and he feels that whilst the chip design good, we're doing the right things and so forth, he feels that an area that it's prime and very fertile for Penang is the advanced packaging, given that vast experience we have in OSAT. Yeah. So that is the one area of focus. The other area of focus is the TVET, the stuff that we're doing. I think we need to double down and increase our ability I would say double the number of graduates we output in Tibet. I think that's an area that is definitely needed in the industry. We got to do a lot more activities in order to increase the supply, the input into the college to get the output. The third, not in any order, but the third is that, I have been following AI for the last year, 2 years, and so forth. And, I have been in industry for many years, and I've seen technologies come and go, technologies that, burst into life, but never, some of the things that I'm not critiquing, but I'm not into that area too. Yes, blockchain is there, but it's there, all right? If you look at things like metaverse, it's there. It's not really, AR, VR, for example. But one thing that after a couple of months listening to podcasts and YouTube, watching YouTube on AI, I'm really, really convinced that this is a transformational enabler. Let's not underestimate this and say this is another cloud that is move on. I feel this cloud is going to stay and it's going to rain on you.
Yeah.
All right. So from a PSDC perspective, we are taking proactive steps. I hope it is proactive to make sure that we are bringing in, I call it role-based programs on AI. I think a lot of organizations are doing broad brush and AI fundamentals, AI 101, AI this and that and so forth. For me, coming from industry, and I just recruited a very strong CTO into PSDC, our thoughts are that we got to make sure that in order to convince industry and convince these people that we need to show immediate productivity and efficiency by using certain AI enablers. And I call it more of role-based AI. For example, there are capabilities, and we have been working with partners, AI for procurement. How can AI help you to improve efficiency and productivity? AI for coding. Sundar Pichai said that 25% of his codes are AI-driven.
Right.
I think it is going to go up. So be very surgical, focus on AI for role-based, and so that people can see the benefits. One of the challenges that we have, continuing challenges we have in PSDC is that typically when we work with MNC clients, I think they know, and because they're driven by corporate, they understand what's going on, and they will come to us and say, hey, I need this kind of training. But if you look at the local companies and SMB, they need a lot of hand holding, because for them it's business bottom line driven. Does this technology really help us to improve revenue, improve or reduce costs? And so we got to be very surgical, and that's on the AI. Of course, the other one that I always feel that we got to drive more, we tried our efforts last year, but it really didn't have a lot of traction, is in the entire sustainability in ESG, especially among the local companies. We got to do a slightly different, we got to take a different strategy on how to bring them on board in this area. And of course, there are couple of other areas like continuing to support the businesses and so forth. So I give you a couple of examples where my focus is going to be for the next 2 years, 3 years.
Why is that why is that a challenge with ESG and sustainability?
No, I think that, if you look at it, companies, typically larger companies, understand the significance and the potential ramifications and potential impact to their businesses. They are very clear at the highest level. But if you look at our local ecosystem, they are on the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 supplier base and so forth. Until it hits them, they are not going to, be moving into that area or adapting their business into that area. So there is a time lag in my mind, Salah. It's not that, and they tend to sit on the fence at this point in time. I think that they will be reactive, they'll get it done, but we want them to be more proactive. And this is how, we are trying to help these local companies in that sense. It is, even if you look at digitalization, I mean, Salah, I think you understand the landscape. There are thoughts that in some studies that some of the companies in Malaysia are still at maybe IR 2.5, IR 3. They're not really. Why? Because bottom line driven. Does it help to reduce my cost? Does it help to bring my revenue? If it's not, it's good enough because, Malaysia is continued to be, competitive labor-wise. But I think that will disappear, as AI comes on and more digitalization. So we got to help them to be proactive and look at the long term. And in some instances, if you look at government agencies like the Northern Corridor Authority, and they are actually incentivizing these companies. Think proactively. We will help you to take the first 2 steps. Yeah. So we got to work with organizations like this in order to provide the training interventions for that.
Yeah. I see. Wrapping up this marvelous discussion, I would actually like to understand from your side, Harry, is that what advice would you offer to industry leaders who are seeking to build a stronger talent pipeline through the experiences that you've seen through Motorola, your experience at PSDC?
To be fair to my industry partners and the CEOs and GMs, as I said, I've been in this landscape for the past 30 plus years, and way back in 92, 95 when I started, there's a tremendous difference the way that leaders are driving talent acquisition and talent development in especially around the northern region. They are very proactive. They've been working with the government agencies. They are working directly, proactively with the universities in order to make sure that they are going up there. Even some large companies are taking interns even up to year 1, year 2. They're being proactive in doing it. So I don't think I want to give them advice, but I would suggest that rather than comment and critique the higher learning institutions, let's collaborate and work together in terms of coming up with strategies that ensures that we are getting the tertiary institutions are producing the talents that are needed by the industry. One of the areas that I think I mentioned is one of the areas that I feel very strong is that I think the academia also needs a lot of help from industry. I wish that universities have got a very structured training curriculum for their own academicians. Yeah. I think in the old days, I think you would hear the word called sabbatical. Sabbaticals were done purely because they would say, okay, I need to go to this university to extend my research. I need to acquire knowledge so that I can come back and do more research activities and so forth. It wasn't really teaching in that per se. My view is that I don't think our academicians need to travel out of the country. They can go out of the country in country because the MNCs are here.
Right.
They will provide you the kind of environment and the learning of applications and technologies here. I think there are a lot of good organizations. So I think we need to have a proactive step if industries and universities can work in that area. I'm just specifically talking about universities. We can go further down to vocational colleges and community colleges that produce a lot of talents, the technician area. We can replicate the same model with them too, with industries and so forth. So if we could share that knowledge, share that experience between industries and for the academia, then I think it will be a win-win situation for Malaysia.
Thank you, Harry. Harry, is there anything else that you'd like our listeners to, of course, know about PSDC's mission or your personal perspective on the future of workforce development here in Penang?
I think, I said a lot about PSDC and we are here to continue to add value to the industry, and we continue to stay proactive in developing the type of programs that the industry would need. We were more than happy to work with, and by the way, I want you to know that, PSDC has got about 90 odd staff. About 30 plus are in the school colleges for teaching and so forth. The rest is supporting the industry. We do not have expertise in all areas. And what we do is that we work with partners and long-term partners to provide the type of training that our industry needs. And we are more than open. This podcast is going worldwide. We are more than open to work with organizations outside Malaysia to have partnership to bring programs into Malaysia. For example, we work with IPC. They're very good on the semiconductor area, for example. So we bring programs into that. So from a PSDC perspective, the other part of it is that, one area I did not talk about is that, one of the areas that I've seen from a talent perspective is that, as I said, I can double my my output by increasing the input. And, we got to encourage young talents out there. And hopefully, Salah, with your podcast and all, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have this is that we need to encourage more and more younger talents to come into engineering, especially in the E&E, ME, and semiconductor area. It is a exciting time. The opportunities are so huge out there. And sometimes, I think young talents go for the short-term view of going into grab, but think of it as a long-term profession. Think of it as a long-term fulfillment activity. And there's a lot of opportunities out there. If you look at a lot of the companies out in Penang, I can only be myopic and talk about Penang, majority of the leaders are local. Yeah. And they went through that learning part, and they've been very, very successful in their lives. So there are a lot of opportunities, for young talents to move into this area. I hope that gets communicated clearly there. Yeah.
Thank you, Harry. Harry, we have a tradition on the podcast, just to wrap up. The last person leaves a question for the next person. So the last person left you the following question.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's how would you create change to improve what you see in Penang that you, not the government, you can be in control of, or that you can influence?
Wow, that's a long question with a lot of change. Say it again.
So maybe that is what it is. How would you create change to improve what you see in Penang that you can be in control of?
Okay.
Or that you can influence?
Okay. I think if you want to do a change, it has to start with you. All right. And I always believed, in fact, coincidentally, I do a one-day program on transformational or change management for leaders and so forth. And I always feel that if you want to make a change, you got to commit to it, and you got to believe in it. You got to believe in it in order to make the change, and it has to be. Whatever change, whatever transformation that you would like to do must have a very, very specific purpose and focus and so forth. And just to give you an example, it's a kind of a personal crusade that I do when I want to make change or transformation. Is that the previous organization that I was in, I was challenged that we were not highly innovative enough, given the fact that I had about 1,000 R&D engineers and so forth. And I did different strategies. Put them on training, they become innovative. It doesn't work. Give the directors a KPI, let them make innovative. It didn't work. So what I did, if you want to make a change, start small. I call it start with the 2-pizza team. Do you know what I mean? 2-pizza team. About 8 people.
Okay.
Start with that. Start with the cause that, and also pick on those people that are passionate about it. There are in organizations, there are people that are passionate, but they don't really talk a lot. They are hiding somewhere. Go find them. If you have a common cause, they believe in the common cause, work with them, sponsor them, support them, recognize them, and move towards it. That's how I used to control and move forwards. And of course, you can always continue to influence and bring more support, and sponsorship, and so forth. So those are some of the start small. Yeah. That's always been my winning formula.
Marvelous. Harry, thank you
Thank
so
you,
much
Sarah.
for this wonderful
Thank you.
discussion. Much appreciated. I'm excited to see the great work that PSDC is doing in your leadership, making it a very unique platform that actually the world can really aspire to as a whole. So I wish you all the best. And thank you again. Thank you for joining us on the Semiconductor Leadership Podcast.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you.
Thank you.